Well, hello, AP Gov people. Uh, let's see where we're at. I hope everything's good. Sorry, I'm checking my face because I just finished getting a workout. So I'm kind of gross. Um, I mentioned to my site crew this morning that I've been watching that Jordan series. That is solid. That is good stuff. And I don't know if you guys happen to check it, but the NFL draft occurred, and the NFL draft was awesome. The Broncos have picked up some studs, and my beloved Miami Dolphins have done pretty well for themselves too. I'm hoping that Tua works out. Everybody talks about him being the new Drew Brees. That would be okay. Dolphins could use a Drew Brees. It's been a while since the Dolphins have been good. And then Post Malone doing Nirvana covers. Exceptional. Did not know that that kid had that kind of talent. Alrighty. Hopefully you've been watching a fair amount of the media and the media's coverage of this whole thing, the politics, and trying to assess what the job of the gatekeeper that I discussed with you, whether they were doing a good job or not. We did have. Our president he stormed out of a press conference, which is a right of the president. He can call a press conference and have the media there. I never understood why he was going with so many press conferences or with COVID daily briefings, because he really doesn't like the press. And that's not totally unjustified. I mean, there's two sides to that coin. He hasn't done the greatest jobs with this, for sure, but the media has had it out for him since day one. And I'm someone who's watching from the middle, because I got no problem with whoever our president is. I have a problem with locking down the country. I think that's just idiotic, but I'm old, and I understand I could get that virus, but I just think that the economic stuff is I just am not willing to accept this economic stuff. That's my economics teacher speaking. Ugh, God, I'm so gross. Why light? Why light? So, hopefully you're watching the news. Hopefully you got some good takes on the role of the news. The news's job is to put out releases, obviously. They get some news and they quickly try to get it to the public. Now, how quickly they get it to the public determines who gets paid. So, yeah, true story. Last night, it's like 11 o'clock. I'm sitting there flipping through the news. I like to look at the news right before I go to bed. That makes a lot of sense. But bed for me is a little different. I usually stay up watching old bike races, and then I read. So I go to bed at like 10, but I go to sleep at like 2. And you're saying to yourselves, yeah, Mr. Walsworth, that sounds normal and sane. It's not. But we all cope. So, true story, I'm reading through the news last night, and I see that apparently the antacid that I take, because I'm old and I drink a little too much beer, and not much. I mean, I drink like 1 or 2 beers a night with dinner. Don't be judging me. But a good craft beer, I've made it perfectly clear I do enjoy a good craft beer. But And then I ate a bunch of pepperoni pizza last night and I think I ate the leftover rice and tofu. I had a lot of food last night, but it's besides the point. I take famotidine, Pepsid. I take an antacid at night, and it really helps. Um, and I'm reading the news, and sure enough, the antacid that I take has been linked to survival, higher chance of survival with COVID because it blocks a certain COVID protein. So I'm sitting there going, this all comes around to the news media because immediately, and that's a news release, I'm tying it in, you're going to notice that these lessons are starting to get off the rails a little. But I'm looking at this news release, important term, and I'm like, oh my God, tomorrow, it'll be like the new hand sanitizer. So I have to run out and get enough of my antacid so that I have it for until the rush on antacids goes away. That's what I'm dealing with. So that's a news release. Famotidine or whatever it is, Pepsid, apparently can help you survive COVID. So news release, a briefing is something like you see every day with the coronavirus briefing. These are all media events. And so that coronavirus briefing is designed to keep the public aware. Is that a briefing or a news conference? News conferences are typically high-level officials, and certainly our COVID stuff has been high-level, but those seem more like a briefing on the day's whatever's been going on, more so than a news conference. A news conference I always associate with something you would call if there was, for example, someone robbed the Treasury, Now, leaks. This is important. Washington Post got a leak regarding the Watergate break-in. And the leak came from someone known as Deep Throat. Now, Deep Throat was the name of an adult film in the 70s, and it's, yes, it is kind of amusing that the primary leak in the most important presidential case in history came from someone who chose to go by the name Deep Throat. Now, I believe we kind of think it was Diane Sawyer, or no, yeah, because she was working in the Nixon White House. I don't know, but a leak is what brought down Nixon. Somebody leaked it to Woodward and Bernstein. And by the way, you should watch All the President's Men if you haven't already. It's a good film that talks about the gatekeeper, which is the news media. So just an FYI, it's a pretty good take on the news media. But the leak was, that was the Deep Throat leak. And it was, just to refresh your memory if you don't remember Watergate, Watergate was the plumbers who were the plumbers. These are Nixon's henchmen, called the plumbers. And the plumbers, G. Gordon Liddy and his crew, they break into the Democratic headquarters that are in the Watergate Hotel. You ever seen Forrest Gump, where he's like looking and he sees the break-in and he calls? That's kind of funny. But the leak is what everybody just thought. Oh, well, it's a break-in. Whatever. What are we going to do about that? But it was much more than a break-in. By the way, Nixon was using Cuban rebels, guys that had been used to fight Castro, and then when Castro was clearly going to win, they were repatriated to be used for nefarious government activities. Um, and that's the plumbers utilized these Cuban nationals that had no choice but to become. It was like, look, our government doesn't do anything out of compassion. Our government does things out of, oh, well, we can use these Cuban expats, and no one knows who they are. They don't have any ID in America. So Nixon used, the plumbers utilized Cuban rebels. So, I look, the long and short of it is, our government has such an amazing history, and I've said this a million times, amazing history of nefarious, dirty dealings, that trusting the government is you're using bad judgment. Always assume, and I mean, I guess this is my opinion, but I'm a freaking history teacher. Next year, I'm teaching American history. I teach American government. I can give you millions of examples of the government just doing things because they feel like doing it. And, so now by the way, I don't necessarily mind that. I'm a big fan of the old school CIA. That was just, look, if the CIA had the power in 2001 that it had under Reagan, there ain't no planes going into the American Twin Towers. That much I promise you. Those guys, all of them, are dead and buried, at various times throughout their existence. But you reel in the CIA, that's the Central Intelligence Association, or Central Intelligence Administration. And they are not allowed to practice on U.S. soil. They handle dirty dealings. I kind of like the dirty dealing part. I just am not. I'm not about to start trusting government. I'm okay that there's a lot of stuff that I don't need to know about, but I'm not about to start trusting the government. And I went into that a little last class. There's a couple terms that you need to know: on the record versus off the record. That's like your basic stuff regarding, can I use this, or why would a politician say something off the record? Well, they might say something off the record to try to get the person that's interviewing them to understand why they can't talk, to understand that I will be able to answer this question at some point, but not right now. Or they may, typically if a politician speaks off the record, they're not giving the news media some golden gem. Okay, what they're essentially doing is they are just kind of trying to explain, hey, look, off the record, I just can't talk about the fact that we're selling arms or we're trading arms to Iran for hostages. I can't talk about that. That would be a huge gem. But Reagan dealt with by the way, that was called the Iran-Contra crisis, and it was a trial in which Reagan, he was trading missiles to Iran for hostages and diverting stuff down to Central America. But yeah, that was a bad example. I don't look, man. You know what off the record is, and that that's kind of the way things work with the press. Now, you have to understand that the Federal Communications Act of 1934 monitors all your news media. Okay? So they have to be really careful. In 1996, we have another. I think we do something telecommunications wise. Hold on. 1996 Telecommunication Act. That one was applied to getting more competition within the newest news medium, which is the one I'm kind of going to now with you, is the so look, I'm like kind of okay. 1996, we realize that there's going to be the interweb, and that our news sources could get very narrow. So in 96, this was designed to break up some of the broadcasting companies and to get more competition in broadcasting, because it really was pretty narrow in scope. And it also in 96 addressed the question of, okay, we are now in the internet age, and this is right when the internet's, and so how we got to talk about cable companies and stuff like that. And this is important. All cable is Comcast cable, I believe, the cables, but I believe it's that 96 Telecommunications Act, which enables the government to say to Comcast, you are a monopoly. We allow this monopoly because you laid all this cable. But you're going to have to share this cable and lease it to CenturyLink or whoever. So if you wanted to start a telecommunication company, the government would support you and mandate that you have access to the cables that were originally put down, because we can't. This is the reason cable is they're allowed to be in the monopoly, is because we can't have a company have to start from scratch. You would have no ability to start from scratch. Okay, so anyway, that's kind of the cable thing. Now, the one thing we have right now, we have this interweb, and the internet is filled with quote unquote potential news sources. Okay, and because we have all these news sources, the fact is that the government has to kind of step in and see what's up. Hold on a second, let me. Oh. Sorry. I'm trying to reach it. No, never mind. So because of the fact that we have, you've probably heard that Facebook and maybe Twitter were alleged to have been fallen victim to Russian bots that were trying to get Trump elected. That is a pretty recognized reality. And now, were they messing with votes? No, they were messing with information. Okay? And people aren't that smart, kids. I know that might come as a shock. People are just not that intelligent. The majority, you are for the most part, but what was alleged and what is still alleged is that the Russians flooded Facebook primarily with erroneous facts. And people were taking these facts and going with them. Now, how do you control that? I mentioned 96 and the telecommunications. This is new ground. So what we're going to start to see some court cases that use this new ground and address it. And so right now, though, the censor, like for example, Jack Dorsey Twitter censors its own service. So this is, again, very questionable in terms of constitutionality and freedom of speech. You have a platform, i.e. Twitter, and yet you are censoring content. Now, you can say that in what they're censoring is what they label it could be hate speech, which that's fine. Sort of mean-spiritedness, I think, all stuff that you and I look at and say, okay, well, it's good maybe that you got to ask yourself, are we smart enough to have complete freedom of the press and freedom of speech? I mean, that's the real question here. So right now, Facebook will not censor. Zuckerberg has said, I'm just not going to censor. Twitter does censor. YouTube censors. So these are all things that are going to have to be resolved for us to kind of move on. Now, one more thing about press is, how many of you have watched C-SPAN? Okay, Cable Satellite Public Affairs Network. You can watch like your state House of Representatives, your state Senate, the United States Senate on that. It's like C-SPAN was created to educate the masses. So I mean, for the most part, I'm kind of done with the press. I believe I assigned you a practice test in the last class. That'll be that practice test is your last big assignment. I will keep going with these dog walk lectures, if you will, and some of them, some of them might be, a little rambling at this particular juncture because my brain is fried. I'm also going to post like an office hours opportunity, so that if you feel like chiming in, you can. It'd probably be either in the morning or in the afternoon. Anyway, let's see. Is there anything? We talked about bias, and anyway, get to work on that practice test, and I'll see you soon, boys. I have another killer video for you on Wednesday that'll make you say, "Damn, Mr. Walswear is good. These are viral videos. This is better than Post Malone playing all of Nirvana's Unplugged album," which you got to check out. Go check that out. That was really good. Love you. Stay strong.